Shadow Secretary of State. Alan, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I can see you this afternoon. You can see me reasonably well.
Yes.
And you can hear me as well. That's great. Good.
Yeah.
Well, let's say first of all how sorry I am that I'm not able to be with you this afternoon in person. This is not any doing of mine. I have to say this is because it would have been a long journey to get up to Skipton and back, and that has been compounded by the fact that we have a rail strike tomorrow, which meant that having got here, I would have very happily get back home again afterwards. And much as I love the prospect of staying an entire weekend, possibly more, in Skipton, I'm afraid that's not going to be easily possible. So unfortunately, you've got me now on Zoom, which I hope will be a reasonable alternative, and I hope that will also give us the time for Q&A and various discussions following what I have to say. What I want to say in terms of the meeting that we have this afternoon is just how important your meetings on these sort of occasions are for the overall progress of what we hope will be a very substantial implantation of heat pumps, both ground source and air source, into our systems in the very next few years. And I want to say why that is so important and why I think the prospects are really pretty rosy for heat pump industry as a whole, and potentially as rosy as those prospects are for our prospects of dealing with what is the big elephant in the room, obviously at the moment, of how we decarbonise heat in the run-up to our net zero ambitions by 2050 or before. So to start there, obviously we now have, and this is not a matter of controversy between political parties. I'm speaking as the opposition shadow energy and Green New Deal at the moment, and in a department like Miliband that will hopefully take over the concerns for these issues after the next election, which I think you might agree in terms of the events of the last few days is now not likely to be right at the in the near future, is likely to be right at the end of the period where you can probably the summer of 2024, at which point it may be the case that Labour will be the new government and looking to proceed very rapidly with our net zero targets up to 2050. The actual achievement of those targets is not in dispute between the parties, but the speed at which we go, the wherewithal we're going to need to get to net zero, and the things we're going to have to do are clearly a matter of considerable, should we say, difference between the parties, and most particularly the question of how we actually get our resources in place in time to make those changes stick over the long term. And in that context, one thing that certainly we on the opposition side take very seriously indeed is just how ragged the progress towards net zero, that is the removal of carbon emissions from our entire economy. To achieve it net zero, we must remember, is not just about removing carbon emissions, it's actually covering those carbon emissions with other ways of providing, we say, net negative emissions to offset those carbon emissions that will still be outstanding in 2050. Things such as biomass energy, carbon capture and storage, itself, and various other techniques, direct air capture, which can provide that net negative into our overall carbon balance. But the question of dealing with the future of heat is one in which we are lagging most seriously in all the areas that we are having to deal with, all the different sectors that we're having to deal with in terms of decarbonisation overall. And when we talk about energy as a whole, although we are doing very well in terms of decarbonisation of the power sector, after all, 44% of our power at the moment comes from renewables, and that's rapidly increasing. And indeed, at the Labour Party conference that I've just come from, we committed ourselves in government to go for a 100% renewably powered power sector by 2030 or so. And that means an enormous increase in offshore wind, in onshore wind, lifting the ban on offshore wind and getting on with installing a lot more solar, tidal energy, and so on, to get that 100% renewable target by 2030. But when we look at the way the energy sector as a whole is configured, then 80% of that energy doesn't come, or it comes from heat, both for heating homes, cooking, light, and so on. And it's, I have to say, a real elephant in the room now for our decarbonisation targets, because some 90% of that, 90% of the 80% of the heat, certainly as far as domestic property is concerned, is still derived from fossil fuels, mostly gas boilers, some oil, but mostly unabated gas boilers, and no immediate prospect of that going down very quickly. Certainly not the same way as is happening with the power sector. So progress in decarbonising that particular sector is very much dependent on alternative fuels coming into the sector and alternative methods of heating, and doing that quickly as we can. Those alternative fuels and those alternative methods are fairly small in number. Firstly, we've had a lot of discussion, as I'm sure you're aware, on the role that hydrogen can now play in our low carbon economy, but particularly the role that hydrogen can play in our heating system. We know, for example, that we can inject hydrogen into the gas grid up to about 20%. So we've made some progress in decarbonising the delivery of gas to those boilers, providing that heat at the moment. But above that, you've got to change all the systems, and you have eventually got to take a decision. If you do go for hydrogen, that you basically change the whole delivery system, change the whole network. You've got to transition from a gas network to a hydrogen network, and you've got to have all the equipment that you're going to use for heating, either specially designed for hydrogen or fundamentally re-altered. And the government is claiming that they're going to take a decision from the Egyptian about what role hydrogen will play by 2026 or so. But the prospects, frankly, don't look very good that hydrogen really can take over the main role of providing our heat in our homes over the next period. Firstly, because of the need to change everything in the system, but also the need to actually establish a complete alternative hydrogen distribution system in the not too distant future. And the fact that actually changing your entire system, your entire grid, gas to hydrogen, could be a very difficult process, although we do know that hydrogen is potentially going to be distributed perhaps by a skeleton grid, repurposing some of the gas grid and move on to the next direction, the next level. It looks very difficult to take. So I don't think that the government is going to take a decision in 2026 to convert the entire heating system eventually to hydrogen. Indeed, the purpose of hydrogen, and we need to distinguish between blue hydrogen, which would be created from the use of gas, steam methane reformation to produce hydrogen, and then obviously the byproduct is a large amount of carbon dioxide. So in principle, you go further forward than having gas in the first place, unless you put carbon capture onto your hydrogen production plants. But the purpose of hydrogen, I think, in the alternative system is to reach those parts that electrification can't reach. And that means things such as large vehicles, transport logistics, which are unlikely to go electric and be powered by hydrogen, hydrogen trains perhaps, and also hydrogen in the decarbonisation of energy-intensive industries such as steel, cement and ceramics, various other things, which will need an alternative gas supply to make their processes work. So that is where I think the future mainly of hydrogen lies, but certainly with some elements of hydrogen that are coming into heating in particular places and under particular circumstances, but not overall. Obviously, there's a role for district heating to play in urban areas, and already we're making quite good progress in expanding district heating systems into urban areas. Now, I think as people will know, district heating networks are agnostic as to fuel source. At the moment, most district heating, albeit much more efficient, waste from the heating is captured and reused in the heating systems. Most district heating is from gas-fired engines, and those engines can be replaced by other fuels, and indeed, certainly, many district heating systems can certainly arise, and indeed slightly larger systems can arise from large-scale brownfield. There is indeed a very efficient system just near my home, Southampton, just around the corner from where I'm speaking, which provides flats with a single ground source engine, as it were, at the heart of the particular development. And then we have other possibility of alternative fuels, biogas, biodiesel, and I think should be relevant and potentially useful for those places that are difficult to heat with heat pumps because of their circumstances, and are also often present, and that is alternative fuels like biogas or biodiesel, probably placed in tanks in the same way that oil gas or oil petrol heating is at the moment. So almost by a process of elimination, we've got heat pumps at the core of probably the majority of our efforts to decarbonise heat, particularly in homes. I think the eventual state, the overall way that heat pans out for decarbonisation is going to be something like 50 to 60% of domestic heat, one way or another, sourced from either ground source or air source heat pumps. Hydrogen coming in at about 20% of the total, alternative fuels perhaps 10%, and district heating, which may include some hydrogen for the engines, or pumps coming through with about 20% of the rest, particularly in dense urban areas. So that's the sort of split that we should, I think, begin to look at. And it, as can be clearly said, does not rely on a single panacea for everything in any particular technology. It's a combination of technologies that are going to get us to that heat decarbonisation target. But of course, the predominance of heat pumps in that decarbonised system does mean that we've got to take some very urgent action to get those heat pumps going. And I think it's fair to say that it's not that there has been no action in getting heat pumps going, but that the action that government has to sort out heat pumps in the domestic sector falls very far short of those sort of figures of what we actually need over the next few years to get heat pumps clearly in that majority position as we decarbonise heat. And I think it will be generally known that the boiler upgrade scheme, which I took part in getting the statutory instrument through to do it, specifies something like 30,000 heat pumps per annum installed under the scheme until 2025. That's at 90,000 overall, which will be subject to the 5,000 underwriting per installation. And the government then sets that across the target that has been set of 600,000 heat pump installations per annum by the late 2020s. Now, even if that 600,000 target of installations were to be achieved by the late 2020s, then it would only get us halfway predominance that we need to look at now for our domestic heating system. And frankly, the idea that 30,000 heat pumps per year until 2025, and then an achievement from that of the rapid ascent to 600,000 3 or 4 years later, that is just wishful thinking, I think. I don't think the market is going to make up that in installations over the period. So the first thing I think we need to say is that those figures, encouraging though they are in terms of what the heating sector compared to other things being the only instrument that we get heat pumps going, is a change, and it recognises the underwriting that is needed as heat pumps parity of boiler insulation and so on. Then it does make those changes, but we think from the opposition side they are far too low, and they are not likely to return to outcomes in terms of how we go forward on that heat decarbonisation overall. Now, of course, we also know that even if we do have that level of increase in heat pump installations over the period, we think the target should be at least 50% more than that right through the period, and that the underwriting will go through to 2030 at least with the installation of heat pumps. We know of course, that there are tremendous problems. There will be great problems with supply chain. I.e., can we reduce the numbers of heat pumps that we're going to need, hopefully in the UK over the next period? Secondly, do we have the installers for heat pumps at the moment to ramp up to that extent? And thirdly, where do we stand as far as potential customer resistance to those installations over the period? Now, we know that the government has also set targets for the end of gas boilers in property. No new gas boilers in new build homes after 2025, and no new gas boilers going into replacement homes after 2035. But even with those targets, we're still going to have a problem, I think, of reaching the numbers present on the supply chains that we need to get going, and indeed the training and uprating of the skills of people who can install those heat pumps over the period. And we also know, of course, that at the moment, boiler replacement for heating purposes is very much based on distressed purchases, and distressed purchases relate to someone coming round to the home saying, your boiler's not working, you need a new boiler, and quite often saying, well, the new boiler you need is a Bosch or a Valiant because of the particular training background that that particular installer has. So it's not just a question, I think, of making sure that we have sufficient numbers of people who are trained or retrained to install heat pumps, but also getting across to the whole installer market that actually those options are, the gas boiler options are closed, and that you need to get serious about how you are recommending and discussing replacement purchases for boilers over the period. Now, one thing I think could be very important in terms of that development rollout is indeed what is now happening in terms of the drive that we are absolutely going to have to undertake over the next few years in terms of uprating the energy efficiency of our homes. As we know at the moment, the only scheme that is really getting underway with that is the ecosystem, which tends to look at individual homes and uprate them on a house-by-house basis with an obligation by energy companies. We in the opposition are committed to a refurbishment programme for 19 million homes across the country, which will be run in an entirely different way, on an area basis, with local authorities at the fore, refurbishing those homes, and most importantly, undertaking house makeovers. So you only have to go and refurbish those homes once. You don't have to visit them again in terms of their energy efficiency as we get closer to the net zero target. So that's, among other things, means completely re-equipping the home with the wherewithal to heat itself successfully in a low carbon environment. So it's much more than rough insulation, wall insulation and so on. It's actually about changing the nature of working in those homes so that that house can be refurbished to the standard that we think is necessary. And obviously heat pumps are going to play a very substantial role in that refurbishment programme as a method of getting us towards our targets by that method as well. So in short, what I hope I've been able to convey to you is that the Labour opposition, hopefully soon to be the new Labour government, is completely committed to the rapid deployment of heat pumps as a predominant method of decarbonising our economy. It is up to industry to be there in good order as that challenge takes off. but we understand that industry is going to take an enormous amount of help in making sure it can deliver in the way that we hope it will be able to. And among other things, our Great British Energy Company that we've committed to undertake in government may be on hand to help with the investment and the work that needs to be undertaken to get heat pumps both produced and deployed in the way I've described. So a really rosy future for heat pumps, but a rosy future that's only going to be as rosy as it could be with the collaboration of government, industry, installers, the whole market, and actually making sure that our ambitions for getting heat pumps installed in the way that we know has to be done is really going to be achievable in the timescale that we know it's going to have to be done by. So thank you very much for listening to me this afternoon. I hope you've been able to where we are on heat pumps, and I welcome any discussion and questions you may have about what I've had to say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Whitehead. Can you hear us okay? Can you hear me, Dr. Whitehead?
Yes, yes.
That's good. I'm just going to ask for any questions. Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering whether the Labour Party has a position on the relative pricing of gas and electricity, and whether we should be influencing the pricing so that electricity is preferable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a question which I think, as will be known, has become extremely pertinent over the recent period, as gas international prices have just run away and have caused, and it is not just have caused the crisis that we presently have with energy bills. And of course, what that means in terms of progress over the next period is, as far as bills are concerned, that unless we are able to disaggregate the role of gas in making the market as far as bills are concerned, that is, that everybody's bill is effectively delineated as far as electricity is concerned, as if the electricity had come from gas, because of the role that marginal pricing plays in the electricity markets. And even though, as I said, 44% or so of power is now produced from renewables, we are running a system which just assumes that the entire system is run by fossil fuels, and the whole market is deployed accordingly. So there will be some difficulty in unpicking the market from its the assumptions that it comes from gas, but I think that needs to be done very rapidly in order to reflect the much cheaper now delivery of power from the renewable sector compared with power delivered by gas through to electricity. And that will entail a number of things, such as replacing renewables obligation arrangements on some renewable power with contracts for difference, but also with pushing gas to the margin of the power market over a period, that actually placing gas-fired power stations into a strategic reserve, bringing the merit order of renewables to the centre, and probably introducing such things as green power pools for low carbon trading. but among other things, I would say that it does make the equation between boilers and heat pumps a very different proposition. That is that renewables, and certainly if renewable electricity can be put at the heart of the market in the way I've described, renewables are now something like 9 times cheaper to produce electricity from than from gas. So the equations that we've talked about in terms of relative cost of heat pumps compared with the relative costs of boilers are changing before our eyes, and clearly that will have an effect on the extent to which certainly we will be able to underwrite the installation of heat pumps over a period, and the number of treatments that can be undertaken compared with the support that is presently there for gas boilers. So I think that transition of the electricity supply market towards a renewable assumption is going to be good for the assumptions we're going to have to make about the deployment of heat pumps. After all, we will be obviously paying electricity bills for an element of heat pumps, but the electricity bill that we'll be paying for that element of heat pumps will be much lower, and the percentage gain that heat pumps will produce will therefore be much greater.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any final questions? I'm very conscious that we need to get into the time that you did not commit to us, so I'll ask for one final question, if there is any. Yeah.
A lot is made of the intermittency of renewable electricity generation. Obviously, wave and tidal would solve some of that. But what I haven't heard enough of from any government is the investment in power storage and thermal storage. Have you any ideas or plans for power and heat storage?
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely. I think the first point to make is actually to debunk those myths about intermittent renewable and low carbon energy, and the assumptions that are then made by a number of people that we're going to need at least an equivalent amount of gas continuing in the system to back up that renewable power. Well, that is indeed true. True, because of the ability of the renewable system to store itself, not just on a daily basis, predominantly through batteries, but the ability to develop interseasonal storage, which can be done in a variety of ways, including thermal storage, hydro storage, compressed air storage, various other things such as that, which will clearly be a very substantial part of the system in the future. By the way, one of the greater advantages of tidal range energy for the future is that if you place your tidal lagoon in different parts of the country where the tide literally where the tide comes in and goes out at different times, your product for the national grid will be your net product will be reliable 24/7. So tidal range is not just completely predictable, but it can be completely continuous over a period as an addition to the renewable arsenal. So certainly a new Labour government pay a lot of attention to the development of interseasonal storage, which can certainly be developed very rapidly in this country in order to balance the system in the future, and may well be a subject of investment by the Great British Energy Company that we have recently announced at conference and will be getting going as soon as a new Labour government is in place.
Okay, Dr. Whitehead, thank you so much indeed on behalf of everybody in the audience, and could we just show our appreciation for Alan?
Thank you very much, Chair, for that warm reception. I hope I've been of some use in guiding the debate forward, and I'm very sorry I can't be with you further, and I hope nevertheless you will have a very good gala dinner this evening, and that the conference will go very well as a result. So thank you very much once again for inviting me, and I hope to see you again in the not too distant future.
Thanks so much. Okay, we have a break now.
Thank you, Alan.
We are leading to that break by 10 minutes. If we could try